Everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to today's Better Account Setup and Onboarding and Financial Services presentation. My name is Allison Andrade. I am the director of the projects team, and I am joined today by Annie Orchard, who's a project manager in the team as well. And we're both excited to be sharing with you new research that the team has been working on for the last few weeks, centered on user insights around account applications and account onboarding. Now, for today's presentation, we're really honing in on two specific areas that you see here. I'll be speaking to online application, more so sharing with you users' thoughts around setting up their account during the application process and what type of help, support, services do they need as they're completing the application. Annie will be speaking to the onboarding portion of today's presentation, talking more so on users' thoughts on getting accounts set up during the onboarding period. What are some helpful features that they're hoping to see during onboarding? And we have allotted some time for Q&A towards the end. But if you have any questions during the presentation, there should be an FAQ chat in the webinar platform. So if you have any questions, please feel free to just add them in. But before we get started, just wanted to talk a little bit about Corporate Insight, especially for those who are not familiar with us. So we provide actionable competitive intelligence and customer experience analysis to the nation's leading financial service, insurance, and healthcare firms. Our core services help clients track and analyze industry trends, understand changing customer behaviors, maximize competitive advantages, and improve their perspective and customer journeys. There's a total of 5 core services that we offer here at Corporate Insight, including monitor services, experience benchmarks, consulting services, UX research, and quantitative research. If, for example, you're looking for custom tailored research around benchmarking, qualitative research, consulting services could be the research that you need. If you're looking more into in-depth benchmarking analysis around digital user experiences with gap analysis and some actionable recommendations, Experience Benchmark might be the research for you. If you're interested in any of our services, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We're more than happy to speak to any of these services and see how we can better help you. And with that, we'll get started. So over the past few years, the consulting services portion of Corporate Insight has conducted various studies around account opening and onboarding for financial services firms. Now, each of these studies vary. For example, in verticals, we have done the studies within cards, bank, small business, lending spaces. And personas also change in these studies, specifically based on our clients' needs. If they're really looking to improve the application or onboarding experience for, let's say, new to firm customers, or if they're looking to improve this experience for multi-relationship customers, we've done different types of studies. And then lastly, we've looked at the onboarding portion, post-account opening for different intervals, including 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months. Again, depending on what are clients hoping to see during the onboarding experience and what improvements and strategies are they looking to implement. Now, based on these studies, we have gained a good understanding of the type of online application and onboarding user experiences that are offered by financial services firms. Now, as of late, we were really interested in understanding more so of the application and onboarding space, but looking further into what are users' thoughts overall. So we did field a survey to understand some key questions here. So what are users' thoughts on setting up their account as early as the application process? What important actions are users looking to want to complete post-account approval? What are new post-account approval features that are most helpful or beneficial to them? And which firms are meeting these actual user needs? So we're really hoping to answer these questions throughout today's presentation. Now, in order for us to conduct this research, as I mentioned, we did field a survey we fielded the survey through Research Test in May of this year. There was a total of 457 respondents. And on the right side, you'll see that we included a breakdown of the respondents themselves by age group, gender identity, and annual household income. Participants for this survey were required to have opened a credit card within the past 5 years and completed their card opening within a digital channel, whether that was mobile app or a desktop website. And participants in the survey had at least one bank account and stated they had opened a bank account within the last 5 years as well. Now, to complement the survey research, we went ahead and also included for today's presentation example of financial service firms that are offering these type of user needs or wants or interesting findings that we came across. And then lastly, we partnered with the UX research team here at Corporate Insight, who were able to provide some insights based on studies that they had conducted and conversations they've had with respondents in regards to application and onboarding. And with that, I'll get started and talk to you a little bit more about online application, account setup, and support. So in this survey, we had a question that asked respondents, how likely or unlikely would you be to perform any of the following actions if prompted during a credit card application? And we listed for them 6 particular actions that are listed on the left side of this chart. And overall, we found that consumers are very open to setting up account preferences within the application flow. A total of 87% of respondents stated they were extremely likely, someone likely to set up account alerts, followed by 83% stating that they would enroll in paperless statements. And then there were respondents who were interested in selecting a card design during the application. In our research, we found that firms take interesting approaches when it comes to paperless statement options during the credit card application process. For example, there are firms like Capital One who pretty much state that they already gone paperless. And so instead of really presenting applicants with that option to enroll in paperless statements, they're advising them and informing them that as clients, they'll receive communications electronically. In this communication, they're asking applicants to accept these terms in order to move forward with the application. However, with Capital One, they do bold that these account settings could be changed once they become a client within their online account. Capital One also does offer an interesting preference option with this paperless statement communication. They're giving applicants the option to receive these communications in English or in Spanish. Then we have Chase that takes a different type of approach. Chase, during one of his card applications, does have a paperless statement section. And within this section, they're letting the applicants know that they do send customers billing statements digitally. However, they're giving applicants the option to turn off the paperless toggle within the application setting, even though it's set by default on. And Chase is also letting them know that once they become clients, they can also change these settings on their online account. So these are 2 different approaches that we're seeing in terms of paperless statements account preferences. Respondents, as you saw, are very open to choosing a card design during the application, but we're seeing that very few firms are offering these types of selections within the card application. We did find that Discover stands out, and we include an image of it here on the left. The Discover It cashback application towards the very top includes a total of 25 card designs that applicants can choose from as they're completing the application. And then we see American Express. They offer for select cards the options for applicants to choose a specific design. While it's not an array number of designs as we see here from Discover, it does offer applicants who are applying for Amex Platinum or let's say Amex Gold the options to choose from anywhere from 2 to 3 different card designs. Both firms are offering these selections within the first step of the card application. So definitely an area where if your organization, company is looking to diversify in terms of online applications, there's very few firms offering these type of selections currently. And then we saw that credit card applicants are very interested in setting up alerts during the application process. But firms ultimately lack this option. In past research, we really haven't found a firm that allows applicants to set up alerts during the application. We definitely seen firms offer these type of account alert setup options during the registration portion once the account has been approved or during onboarding, of which Annie will talk to about a little bit later. What we are seeing is some firms are talking a little bit about what type of alerts are available to customers once they're approved. So for example, City Simplicity card application states within the terms and condition that it notifies its clients about an upcoming credit card being due 5 days prior via email. So it's very specific in terms of what type of alert the actual client should expect. Synchrony's Premier World MasterCard application also notes as applicants are entering their mobile phone number that by entering the number, they're authorizing Synchrony to reach out to them to this number about account updates, as well as send them SMS security alerts. So again, very specific in terms of what type of communications and alerts they should be receiving, but again, not really seeing these type of alert options within applications. So definitely a white space. Now looking at the same question and the same chart, but really focusing on the bottom half portion. Here we see that fewer respondents indicated they're likely to set up preferences that help them develop a deeper connection with the company. For example, fewer respondents, a total of 62% stated that they're extremely likely, somewhat likely to initiate a balance transfer, apply for another product at the firm, or add an additional authorized user. But this could be understandable as these are very specific needs that an applicant might want or need while opening a card. We are seeing that credit card issuers are commonly offering applicants the ability to set up balance transfer and additional card holders during the application process. And they do so kind of differently. So for example, Bank of America, Capital One, Chase, US Bank are firms that we have come across in our research to offer the ability for applicants to transfer a balance to a new card during the card application process. We are seeing firms like Bank of America and Chase allowing applicants to provide specific details about the transfer balance itself. Then there's other firms like Capital One and US Bank that instead are asking applicants, are you interested in transferring a balance once you're a client? Yes or no. US Bank also follows this question with how much are you thinking of transferring over? Ultimately, these type of preferences we're seeing are typically placed in the application process after applicants have provided personal information. So it's either a few steps down the line or it's towards the bottom of a single one-page application. Now, in looking at authorized users and ability to add that additional card holder within the card application, various firms once again are offering these options, including firms like Citi and Wells Fargo. And once again, we're noting that the information requested about additional card holders slightly varies. So most firms are asking for the authorized user's name and date of birth. Others like Citi are also asking about their mailing address. And then we have Capital One that also asks about Social Security as an option, and then the authorized user's primary phone number. Now, in talking to the UX team here at Corporate Insight, they did share that in terms of credit card applicants, for instance, sometimes it's not guaranteed that the actual application will be approved. So some respondents are more inclined to provide less information up front, and then once they're approved, they're more welcomed into providing additional information, whether it's balance transfer or an additional card holder. But nevertheless, from this survey, we're seeing that a lot of credit card respondents are really interested in these type of account preferences. Now, earlier we talked a little bit about the survey itself, and there were participants that stated they have one bank account or that they have opened a bank account recently. So we did pose one or two questions around bank applications, and one of them is how likely or unlikely would you be to perform any of the following actions if prompted during a bank application? And here we listed various actions because, for those of you who may already know, bank applications tend to be a little lengthier and provide a little bit more account preference options during the application process. Overall, we found respondents indicated they're likely to complete various account setup preferences during the bank application. And if you take a look at the top two boxes, so respondents indicating they're somewhat likely or extremely likely, these numbers are way higher than we saw from the credit card respondents. And one of the reasons could be, in talking to the UX team, is that typically bank applicants feel that the likelihood that they'll be approved is much higher than that of a credit card. So they welcome the concept and idea of really setting their account up early in the application process. So overall, banks are generally providing a variety of account setup preferences with the online application, and a few firms do stand out. So in conducting this research, we did find that while Bank of America, Chase, Capital One allow applicants to set up various aspects of their bank account early during the application stage, such as setting up their PIN or making a first deposit, we found that other firms, like let's say Charles Schwab, also lets applicants who are applying for their brokerage and bank account the opportunity to also set up bill pay. And then we have firms, bank accounts that also, bank applications that allow applicants to apply for multiple deposit products. Typically it's checking and savings, but we noticed that a firm like Ally, for example, allows applicants to apply for more than just a spending or savings account. They can add multiple deposit products as they're completing a single application. So for example, if you look at the image here for Ally, they have a cart-like experience where they're able to add on additional products to the application itself. And then another question outside of account preferences that we asked during the survey to respondents were, when completing a credit card application, which of the following support features do you think would be most helpful if you encountered a problem or had a question? So really focusing in on preferred help resources here. And we found that most respondents would prefer access to live chat with a CSR or a listed phone number to call a live CSR. So as you see here, 68% really chose these preference support options. But others did select FAQs or speaking with chatbot, virtual assistant, or getting an email address to contact customer service. Now, access to a firm's CSR via live chat or phone is uncommon on most application pages. Bank of America has stood out in our research as they have a live chat within the card application, which we include an image of it here. Clicking on it and typing live chat agent quickly gives them access to a CSR. We found that other firms like American Express and Discover offer similar chat within their card application, but first present applicants with a virtual assistant chatbot to assist them with any questions they may have. And then US Bank stood out as they prominently placed their phone number and customer service hours on the application dashboard. Now, while less preferred by respondents, more firms offer access to FAQs or integrate their virtual assistants to address customer questions. So we found that multiple firms offer some sort of FAQs across their application pages. Bank of America and Capital One are some examples. Capital One, we include an image of it here, prominently places an FAQ link across the top of its application pages, giving users access to frequently asked questions on various topics related to the application itself and post applications, what are some expectations that they should look out for. And then here we just show an image of Amex and its virtual assistant that's available within the applications. Now, going back to the original questions that we had and are hoping to answer during today's presentation, specifically that around online application, what are users' thoughts around getting started within the application process? The answer is applicants are typically wanting to and interested and open to setting up these account preferences within the application process, both credit card applicants and bank applicants as well, setting up whether it is enrolling in paperless statements or setting up account alerts. And then lastly, in terms of what are respondents looking for in terms of help and support, they want clear application instructions and support throughout the application experience, whether that's in the form of live chat or even FAQs. And with that, I conclude the online application setup and preferences portion. And Annie actually has a lot more interesting findings that she'd like to share around onboarding, account setup, and preferences.
Hello, everyone. So for the remainder of the presentation, we're going to be talking about onboarding, specifically account setup and preferences during this critical first month of that onboarding relationship with a new firm. So first, looking at the account setup timeline. So when after the application approval can clients actually register and access their new accounts? When we asked survey respondents, we did find that 56% of them prefer to set up their online account immediately after the application approval process, whereas 20% of respondents prefer to set up their online account after the physical card arrives, but before the activation process. So we see here that the majority of respondents are interested in receiving that instant access. When it comes to credit card providers, we do see that several different credit card providers are offering clients the ability to set up their online account immediately after this application process. So with cards like American Express, Bank of America, Barclays, Comenity, Capital One, as well as other firms like Citi, Imprint, and Synchrony, we do see that these firms are nudging clients to register their account immediately after the approval process. So across each of these firms, this process of registration commonly is including the process of creating credentials, so a username, an ID, a password, as well as sometimes agreeing to disclosures in terms and conditions. Another critical part of this onboarding process, particularly for new credit card clients, is understanding when they're going to receive their card details. When asked about their preference of when they would want to receive this information, including their card number, their expiration date, their CVV, most survey respondents primarily wanted to receive their credit card details immediately after approval. So not only do they want to set up their account, but they also want to have this information so they can go ahead and make purchases before their physical card arrives. In contrast, we saw that 35% wish to wait until their physical card arrives, and 12% have no preference in terms of when they get their card information. Interestingly, when we break this down by survey respondents' age and generation, we do see that older respondents are fine with waiting until their physical card arrives, whereas younger survey takers kind of favor more immediate card information. So while the overall average is at 53% of our survey respondents wanting to receive their card details immediately, this overall average is significantly decreased because of those boomers within the survey, of which only 27% indicated that they would want to receive their card details immediately after the application, whereas 60% of the boomer respondents preferred to wait until their physical card arrived. You can see that there's a significant jump when it goes from boomers to Gen X and then continues to rise when it comes to millennials and Gen Z. In terms of access here, we see that within our recent studies of account opening, this is not very common to provide clients with card details immediately after the application process. We do see that some travel co-branded cards provide examples across the industry. One example comes from American Express with their co-branded Delta card, Sky Miles Go, Gold, which stands out as a card that is clearly and really definitively giving clients the option to access their card details immediately. Specifically on the application approval page, the client can opt to choose whether they want to receive their card details at that moment or wait until their physical card comes. So this is an interesting solution that could potentially be favorable for both younger and older new clients when it comes to their preferences, because they're able to actually have agency and choose their preference in this moment. If the client goes ahead and opts to receive that information immediately, they do go through an authentication identity step. Then they have to respond to consent and disclosures before they are inevitably brought to their card details page, which does display their card information for a limited time of 5 minutes. The client is nudged to print this page or write down their card details before that 5 minute is up. So interestingly, in this case, American Express is not only prioritizing instant access to card details, but also very much prioritizing security in the process of receiving that secure information. Another really critical part of the onboarding process for new clients is that first login experience. So when they log into their desktop secure site for the first time. We did ask survey respondents what specific features would be of interest and helpful when they log into their account for the first time. And they indicated features like a checklist showing account setup tasks, a shipment tracker for their physical card, a virtual card number so that they can use their actual card before the physical one arrives, and then an option to enhance their login security were some features that were considered to be extremely or very helpful. When we break down each 6 of these assessed features, you can see that at the top here, Card Shipment Tracker really stands out as being the most perceived extremely helpful feature when clients log into this account for the first time. That is followed by both the enhanced login security option as well as the virtual card number, both with 43% of respondents indicating that to be extremely helpful at first login. This decreases a little bit when it comes to account setup checklists. Then in terms of tutorial of online features and tour of platforms, out of the 6 assessed features, these were considered kind of the least helpful in terms of that first login experience. However, it is still important to note that over 50% of respondents did find them still to be very or extremely helpful. Overall, this kind of finding that we saw with this question is that new clients are very much open to having informative and helpful features when they first log into their online account for the first time. When we broke down this information by generation, we did see that in comparison to older respondents, younger survey takers were generally rating informational features as more helpful at first login. So this was across the board with all of the assessed features, including an enhanced login security option, a tour of the platform, a tutorial of online or mobile features. However, we did want to call out one significant difference here between generations, that being that younger generations place much more value on virtual cards during this first login than boomers. So looking at that chart at the top there, you can see that only 11% of boomer respondents indicated that a virtual card would be extremely helpful when they first log into their account. In contrast, the majority of them labeled this feature as moderately helpful, slightly helpful, or not at all helpful. In terms of the perceived helpfulness of a virtual card, this exponentially grew when it comes to younger generations like Gen X, millennials, and then also Gen Z. So with all of these younger generations, they very much perceive a virtual card to be extremely helpful. And this peaks with millennials at 53% of millennial respondents finding it to be extremely helpful. Interestingly, when we look at the assessed features, we do see that a card shipment tracker was rated most helpful by all generations. So across boomers to Gen Z alike, there's a perceived helpfulness of a card shipment tracker when they log into their account. So first, looking at the feature of an option to enhance their security at first login, we do see commonly across the industry that several firms are trying to nudge clients to set up Face ID when they log into their mobile account for the first time on the firm's mobile app. That's pretty standard at this point. However, some firms such as Citi are taking additional steps and excelling by offering a multi-step security process. Specifically with Citi, we see that they have a trusted identity feature where the client is not only nudged to set up Face ID, but then they're also directed to set up a 6-digit PIN for security when they log into their account. When it comes to a account setup checklist on the online account, this is also a feature that was seen as helpful amongst survey respondents. We do see that Bank of America, Citi, and US Bank particularly stand out when it comes to offering an informative and helpful checklist on the online account. However, we do see differing approaches by firms. So when it comes to Citi, their checklist is actually embedded into the homepage. It lists out 4 really critical account setup tasks, and then it also notifies the client how many of those tasks they have completed. So when they log into their account for the first time, it says set up your account, 0 out of 4 completed. In contrast, when it comes to a firm like US Bank, we see that this is an interstitial message that pops up on the desktop when the client logs into their account for the first time. It also lists out 4 kind of key account setup processes, and it directs the client to start now or select maybe later or exit out of the message. We do have a UX insight from our Insights UX team here at Corporate Insight. Typically, users do enjoy these account setup checklists if they're clearly presenting the information. However, they don't want them to shame them. So, for example, with an account setup checklist that includes language around what has been completed versus not completed, such as with that Citi example of 0 out of 4 completed, this is often seen as unpopular and unfavorable to users, whereas they simply just want the information and don't want to know how many more steps they're supposed to be taking. Users typically do not want these checklists or these setup tasks to be persistently featured on their online account. There is an expectation that once they log into their account the first few times, these will no longer be featured. So US Bank's checklist here really serves as a good example of what a typical user based on the user insights would be interested in, because it pops up when the client logs in the first few times. It is not persistently always featured on the account during the first month of onboarding. It also doesn't include that shaming language. And the client can also opt to manage this later if they're not interested in going through with the account setup at that moment in time. When it comes to a virtual card, which again is really seen as across the board a very helpful features, with 71% of our survey respondents indicating that it would be very or extremely helpful when they log into their account for the first time. Again, with those younger respondents showing more interest in a virtual card versus older respondents. But across the board, we do see that this is a kind of favorable feature for first login. However, when it comes to our recent account opening research, we have found that this is not very widespread. Few firms are actually emulating this in the first login experience. Some examples we have seen come from firms like Capital One, Imprint, and Marcus, that when the client logs into their online account for the first time, there is some type of button or toggle that they can see in terms of their virtual card information. Here, Capital One does really stand out because not only does the client see their specific virtual card information when they log into the online account for the first time, but they also very prominently are directed to swipe up to get their virtual card when they log into the mobile app for the first time. When it comes to a platform tour or a tutorial of an online or mobile features, again, this is something that was rated as less helpful in terms of the 6 discussed features. However, again, over 50% of respondents still indicated it would be very or extremely helpful. So it is something that is worthwhile for firms to potentially implement. Another UX insight that we do have for this specific tour or tutorial format is that the first login experience is really a good time to introduce users to new account features and platform. In the beginning of this relationship with this firm, new clients are generally going to be more open and they're more curious about kind of understanding the key aspects and features of their new account. However, when it comes to these tours or these tutorials, it is really important for firms to offer an exit or a skip option so that users that are not interested in actually taking the tour or do not wish to engage can opt out of it and exit out of it if possible. Again, in here, in terms of some helpful examples, we have seen that US Bank really stands out here, specifically when this client logged into their online account for the first time for a new credit card. They're directed with a lightbox interstitial that pops up that directs them to take a tour in order to see their new online banking menu. They are provided with the options to take the tour or remind me later or exit out. So in this case, the client is given the agency on whether or not they actually want to take the tour. Similarly, when the client logs into their mobile app for the first time, they see a carousel of information related to account management features that the client is able to scroll through if they're interested in exploring, or they can also skip if they wish to. Next, we want to focus on card tracker, which again is really the most significant in terms of perceived helpfulness across the board with generations. So 82% of our survey respondents indicated that a card tracker would be very or extremely helpful when they log into their online account for the first time. When it's broken down by generation, there's a slight difference when it comes to boomers and Gen Z and millennials. However, across the board, really it's perceived as an extremely helpful feature for all of these different generations alike. While it is perceived as particularly helpful, we do see that desktop online card trackers are pretty rare when it comes to the industry. In our recent research, we have seen some examples such as from Capital One, Imprint, SoFi, and American Express. Typically, these card trackers are going to be placed on the home page or the dashboard for the credit card. Similarly, it's going to be a meter system that visually shows the client at what step their card is, whether that's shipped, out for delivery, or delivered. We also asked our survey takers if they have a preference of when it comes to how they are notified of their physical cards shipment tracking. And survey respondents were pretty split in terms of their opinions. However, slightly more, with 37%, indicated that they're interested in an email notification when their card arrives. In contrast, we see that 30% were interested in a card shipment that's on their online account or their mobile app, versus 25% of respondents that indicated they wanted to receive an SMS text notification when their card arrives. When it comes to generational divides here, we see that Gen Z as well as millennials prefer card shipment trackers on their online or mobile accounts. They do want to go onto their actual platform to see that tracker. Whereas when it comes to boomers and Gen X, they prefer to receive email notifications of the physical card shipment. So across providers in this industry, we see that a card tracker on the mobile app is even less common than a desktop website online tracker when the client logs onto their account. Some examples that we have seen come from Imprint and US Bank. With Imprint specifically, this client saw a card tracker not only on their desktop account, but also the same exact tracker on their mobile app. This is a potential solution for differing users' opinions when they might have a preference for one platform over the other. Placing them on both desktop and mobile app can allow for more accessibility across various preferences. When it comes to the US Bank example, here we see a button of track your card prominently featured on the mobile app that the client can click into during that onboarding process. When it comes to notifications through SMS or email of card tracking and deliverance status, this is also something that's additionally pretty rare we see with different firms. Some standout cases that we have here come from American Express and US Bank. US Bank specifically sends 2 notifications through email. The first one when the card has been ordered, and then another one when it has shipped. Both of these email communications from US Bank include a button that's a track your card that when clicked will bring the client to their tracker on their mobile app. In contrast, when it comes to American Express, they send several different communications updating the client when it comes to card tracking. The first email indicates what the expected delivery date will be for their new card. A second email tells them that their card is physically out for delivery at this moment. And then a final email asks the client to actually confirm receipt of their card. Capital One really stands out here with this example from the REI Co-op MasterCard co-branded card, specifically because this client saw card trackers across various different communication channels. So not only did they see a standard one on their desktop, the same one was also featured on their mobile app. Then they received an email notification when their MasterCard was on its way with the same kind of tracking information that would lead them to their desktop or mobile app, depending on which platform they were viewing the email. And then finally, they also receive SMS communications about their card shipment. So the first one telling them that their MasterCard has shipped and it provides them with an expected delivery date. And the last one letting them know that their card has probably arrived. Now they can go ahead and actually activate it. Now we're going to talk a bit about account preferences during onboarding. So Allison discussed account preferences during application. Instead, this is really going ahead and setting up these processes during the first month of onboarding. So we asked survey responders how likely they would be to complete the following account setup actions during that first month of onboarding. And they indicated that setting up account alerts, enrolling in paperless communications, adding a card to a digital wallet, and adding a payment account were some tasks that they would be somewhat or extremely likely to complete during this first month of onboarding. When it comes to breaking down these actual tasks, we do see that setting up account alerts is really considered the most likely amongst our survey respondents, with 59% indicating an extreme likelihood to actually do this in the first month. This is followed by enrolling in paperless communications, then adding your card to a digital wallet, then by adding a payment account. You can see that there's a pretty significant drop off when it comes to adding an authorized user, with only 22% of survey respondents indicating that they would be extremely likely to go ahead and complete this task during the first month of onboarding. Intuitively, this is because clients already have a decision from the onset if they're going to go ahead and add an authorized user or not. So it makes sense that it's one that is expressed as a lesser likelihood overall. When it comes to setting up these account preferences, American Express and Discover stand out as two financial firms that push this during the registration process when the client is setting up and enrolling in their account for the first time. So with Amex, the client is nudged to enroll in paperless communications, add somebody to their card, enroll in account alerts, and refer a friend. Similarly, these same four tasks are prompted with Discover registration, accompanied by additional setup tasks such as activating the card, adding a card to the digital wallet or an Amex or an Amazon account, as well as activating rewards and downloading the mobile app. So these firms are really taking the opportunity of when the client is setting up their account to also go ahead and not only set up their credentials, but also notify their preferences when it comes to a variety of tasks. In both of these examples, clients, if desired, can opt out, and they can do this at a later time so they can skip this preferences section. When it comes to paperless communications, this is a task that's often prompted by firms early on in the process of onboarding, whether that be account registration or first account login. With firms like American Express, Discover, and Citi, clients are nudged to do this during the registration process to either indicate their communication preferences or specifically enroll in paperless settings. Or in contrast with firms like US Bank, this is something that's nudged when the client logs into their actual account for the first time. They see it amongst that checklist and they can go ahead and set it up at that time if wished. When it comes to authorized user, this is something that several firms across the industry are consistently pushing clients to do, whether that be on the desktop, the mobile app, through email, etc. However, regardless of the fact that respondents expressed a lesser likelihood to complete this action, it is still important to give that opportunity to clients in case it's something that they want to do. When it comes to industry examples that we've seen in research with Amex and Discover, this is something that's prompted during registration. Interestingly, Amex additionally features this nudge when the client then goes ahead and logs into their mobile app for the second time, so doubling down with that nudge. Whereas with Capital One and US Bank, they feature this nudge when the client logs into their account for the first time. Typically, it's listed within a checklist of overall setup tasks that the client can complete. And then finally, we also wanted to assess how important and significant account setup nudges and reminders can be for these new clients. So we asked survey respondents if your credit card provider sent messages reminding you to complete your account setup, how likely do you think you would be to then complete your account setup? Overwhelmingly, at 87%, respondents indicated that they would be somewhat or extremely likely to complete account setup if the provider sent them message reminders. So this speaks to the fact that reminders when it comes to account setup and setting up preferences can be significantly impactful from the user's view. We do want to caveat this with the idea that it's important to not bombard new clients with reminders, because this is often seen as unfavorable, and trying to strike that balance between sending reminders and making sure that you're not flooding the client's inbox. This is another UX insight that comes from our UX team at Corporate Insight. Because of the fact that new users can pretty much be weary of giving out their email, kind of sensitive to new relationships. They're concerned that they're going to be flooded with emails during that first month of onboarding. If they receive a surplus of information, it's potentially something that can even lead them to opt out of the firm's emails if possible. So striking that balance between sending these helpful reminders and not flooding their inbox is really important for financial service firms. So two examples that we have seen across the industry do come from Amex and Citi, specifically with a account setup checklists that are featured in emails. Here, multiple different account setup tasks are listed out in one specific communication. So the client can reference back to this email if it's something they want to do at a later time. They also receive all of the information in one place. In contrast, if the client receives several different emails that are specific to one just task, this can be something that's kind of bothersome to them. So with an example from Capital One here, this specific email is dedicated to adding an authorized user. If the client receives this multiple times during the first month of onboarding, it's likely not going to increase the likelihood of them actually going ahead and adding an authorized user, because again, from the onset, this is probably something they've decided that they're going to do or not do. So again, firms here, really, it's important to strike that balance and make sure that you're providing these helpful reminders and nudges, but being conscientious of that new relationship with clients. So when it comes to our key takeaways for this onboarding process, the first one is really immediate and direct access to a new account and card details after the application. That is something that's very important and key based on our survey respondents. So the majority of the individuals that we surveyed indicated that they would prefer to receive their card information immediately after approval. They also would prefer to set up their account immediately after approval as well. Second big key takeaway is that respondents generally find informational features upon first login to be helpful. Some of the more helpful features include card trackers, enhanced login security options, as well as virtual cards. And then finally, reminders to complete account setup tasks can increase the likelihood of new clients to act. So the majority of respondents already indicated an extreme likelihood that they would do the tasks such as setting up account alerts as well as enrolling in paperless communications. However, over half of respondents also expressed that reminders to complete setup action would make them extremely likely to do so. So clients, financial service firms can leverage these reminders as a way of trying to increase the likelihood of specific clients to indicate their preferences and set up their online account. So overall, when it comes to our key takeaways for the webinar today, first focusing on application, as Allison went through, the first big takeaway is applicants typically want to set up account preferences within the application process. So doing that right at the start of the relationship can be preferable to new users. The second big key takeaway is clear application instructions and support are needed and preferred by applicants. And then the final three takeaways are the ones I just went over when it comes to onboarding, really offering immediate and direct access when possible, both to account details as well as card information, providing informational and helpful features when the client logs into their mobile app as well as online account for the first time can be preferred by various users. And then finally, those reminders can be helpful in increasing the likelihood of clients to actually set up their account and indicate their preferences. So now we have time for a Q&A. Again, if you do have any questions at this time, please feel free to put them in the chat and we would love to address them. I do see that we have one question already, and this one specifically says, generally, what do new clients want to see the first time they log into their new account? I would say that based on the survey results, we did see that these clients are really interested in having access to helpful features. So again, the biggest one is really that card tracker that's of most interest to all generations, followed by an enhanced security option, so the ability to set up a PIN or something beyond just Face ID or login credentials 2FA. They're also interested in seeing things like a virtual card and an account setup checklist that informs them what they can actually do to finish setting up with their account. While things like a platform tour or tutorials of various features were slightly conceived as less helpful, still the majority of respondents indicated that these would be very or extremely helpful. So I think these are things that firms can still continue to leverage as long as they put an exit or a skip button to give clients that agency. So really overall, when it comes to this first login experience, we see that respondents really indicated that when they log into these accounts for the first time, they want features and information that can help them not only set up their account, but improve their account. Let me see in terms of another question. I think this one is applicable to both application as well as onboarding. It specifically asked, what are opportunity areas for application and onboarding in the industry? So what are areas that maybe the survey takers indicated that they want, but providers are not doing? So first for application, I'm gonna turn this over to Allison to see if she has some thoughts into the application process.
Thank you, Annie. So in terms of some opportunities in the application based on the survey that we conducted, there was a strong interest around really account setup for credit card applications. So we would say typically maybe look into offering or allowing applicants to set up potentially account alerts early on, or communicating what type of account alerts they can potentially have access to as clients. And then in terms of like opportunities for help, support, definitely those FAQs, virtual chatbots are something that applicants are looking for in terms of support. So potentially offering that in terms of assisting them if they have any questions or have trouble completing the application.
Yeah, definitely. And when it comes to onboarding, again, I would really say that what is something that's interested to these survey takers, but not something that's widespread in the industry, is going to be that card tracker. Again, there are firms that are doing this for credit cards as well as debit cards, but it's not as widespread, kind of a standard here, but it is something that across the board is really of interest to these survey takers. So it's something that firms can really jump on now, potentially be ahead of the industry, and also make sure that you're responding to the interests of your actual users. So whether that is on the desktop account, the mobile app with a virtual and physical tracker on the actual account, or if it's something that's sent through email or text message, there is significant interest there from users in receiving status updates so that not only they know when they're receiving their card, but they can actually track that process. Similarly, with younger respondents, there is that interest in a virtual card, specifically for the fact that they can go ahead and make purchases potentially before they receive their physical card if they're able to access their account immediately after application approval. Another question we have here is, what firms stand out for providing good onboarding? It's definitely difficult to say if there's firms that are providing the best holistic onboarding, but I will say that based on our specific survey results, which indicated that helpful features during onboarding would be effective, I do think that Amex and US Bank stand out for emulating several of the different survey respondents' preferences. So with Amex, by offering immediate account registration after application approval, as well as those instant card details for certain cards. These are really two things that were overwhelmingly rated as important to our survey takers. When it comes to US Bank, they really stand out for their onboarding communications and messaging with that first login experience, that dynamic account checklist that doesn't include any shaming language, but informs clients of really important setup tasks that they can complete. They also do feature that online tour and mobile tutorials that clients can engage with if they're interested in them. So with both of these firms, they do offer also that card tracker, which is really significant. Amex offers a desktop tracker, US Bank offering a mobile tracker, and then both also sending email notifications of shipment status. So when it comes to preferences and opinions of our survey respondents, these two firms are really meeting several of the desired onboarding needs. Let me look at the other questions here. We do have a question that asks, what is the top factor for maximizing satisfaction with the new account/onboarding experience? Again, we didn't specifically rate in terms of like this is the most important factor or the top factor that clients are looking for. But when it comes to that first login experience, as well as overall during registration, there is an interest in having the ability to choose whether or not they're setting up their accounts, they're setting those preferences. So if you as a firm are prompting clients to set up their account and go through a variety of different preferences, during that first login experience, that is something that is typically preferred and satisfactory to new users. And then also providing them the option to select do this later or exiting out can also be preferable for the fact that they can come back to it at a later time. Okay, and then Alison, this is a question having to do with application process. It asks, any insights on joint account opening?
Sure. So in the survey itself, we didn't specifically focus on joint account holders. It was mostly to individual card holders, bank applicants, but we have done studies around or looked into joint account opening in the past for our financial services firm clients. And we found that, for example, at least for bank joint accounts, some firms are not fully offering this digitally. There is sometimes a portion of the application where they have to go to the branch to complete it. In terms of the survey actually looking a little bit closer, we did ask survey takers if they're interested in adding a joint account holder during the application process. And there was about, I believe, 47% or 42% of survey takers that said they were either somewhat likely or extremely likely to add a joint account holder to that application. So there is interest there from applicants who are interested in adding just an account holder. And we have done studies in the past. And if you're interested, you can definitely contact us after this presentation if you're interested in doing more research. But
yeah, going based on that as well, just kind of our contact information, additional resources. We do obviously have our consulting services, our custom projects. As Alison spoke to at the beginning, we have done several and numerous account opening and onboarding studies for various different financial service clients. And again, these are focusing on different verticals, so banking, credit cards, small business cards, brokerage, and others. We also have these for different ranges, whether it be a longitudinal or a more short-term study, looking at specific personas such as new to firm, existing clients, or honing in on a specific onboarding message such as communications on the desktop versus communications on the mobile app. So really there's a world of possibility when it comes to custom projects for account opening. So if this is something that is of interest to your firm, please contact us and we would love to do some consulting for you and custom project that relates to your specific interests when it comes to account opening, as well as really anything within this industry. Also, just a little shout out in terms of upcoming research. We do have a mortgage origination study that is set to come out in July. So if this is something that's of interest to you or your firm, please be on the lookout for that. Go to our website, as well as you are going to be receiving this deck after the fact. So you can click the link here and read a little bit more about what's going to be included in that study. But for now, that is all for us. Thank you so much for joining us when we talked about application and onboarding for this webinar. It was really an incredible opportunity to be able to not only look at our research, but also survey respondents to see what the actual preference of these years are. So again, we thank you for joining us. And again, please be in contact with us if you have any interest in future consulting services or account opening studies.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.